let's return to Southern Poverty Law Center, which you and the great Sammy Wink talked about the other day at some length. But one of the aspects of this is the corporate involvement with this institution. And I forget where I picked this up from. It may have been Capital Research Center. Yeah, Capital Research Center is a great resource for investigating these left wing nonprofits. But Apple made a publicly reported $1 million donation to the center in 2017 following the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally. JP Morgan Chase gave 1 million in 2017. Google gave 250,000 in grants. Then also the Clooneys, George and whatever her name is, Amal Clooney, also gave $1 million. There were they so and that's just a tiny slice of Victor, corporate America, whether it's Southern Poverty Law Center or Black Lives Matter or ESG or changing the rules of how we're going to invest your money. They are so deeply involved in so much that's wrong.
I don't think anybody understands that. We, I'm on the Bradley Foundation, a center-right conservative organization. It's mostly for free markets, but we have, I think, about a $1.2 billion endowment. And we had a presentation about 4 years ago where somebody very brilliantly, I won't mention who, showed us the top foundations in the United States based on their endowments. Jack, the top 50, there was no conservative there. We were like 200. I mean, when you look at the Rockefeller or the Gates or the Tides Foundation or the MacArthur, all of this money, it's huge. It's 5, 10, 20, $50 billion. And the left has, and then they're not satisfied with that. And then they become the receptacles, the revolving door for retread bureaucrats in USAID and who give government contracts. So they call their friend up and say, "Can you give us 10 million for transgendered homeless people's operations?" Yes. And then when that person retires, they say, "Can you get me a job for 500,000 as a case officer or something?" And that's what they do. And Trump tried to break that up. And the Southern Poverty Law Center was really, I mentioned to Sammy the Wigilis in Rome. These were the later fire brigades that would show up conveniently at a fire. They just happened, kind of sort of knew where the fire was because they kind of sort of lit it. Marcus Licinius Crassus had, as I said earlier, had done the same thing, but wasn't sure whether he lit the fires. People had accused him of that, but he showed up as their house was burning down and bought it at a cheap price. But these guys would light the fires like the Southern Poverty Law Center and then show up and say, "We can give you a remedy. We will put the fire out for either signing the house over to us or paying us money." So there wasn't enough. Everybody knows until Obama that racial relations had almost reached what we would call equilibrium. And Obama didn't like that because the Democratic message was not resonating. So he wanted to divide the country between as the old Marxist, victimizer. And that was going to be based not on class like Marx, but it was going to be based on race. And it wasn't going to be black, white. It was going to be anybody who wasn't white, regardless of their social status or economic status. And that's what he did. He did that. And so when he did that, the victimization, the oppression, it was like an epidemic. All of a sudden, we heard all these different groups who had, that was when the reparations movement, to take one example, was dead after 9/11. Remember that? David Horowitz wrote a good book right on the eve of 9/11, and then it was over with. And as soon as Obama came in, it started to creep back in. Now we have a California Council on Reparations, et cetera, et cetera. And the Southern Poverty Law Center knew that. They knew that there was not enough victimized people. So they started to seed the KKK, all of these white supremacist groups, and Unite the Right at Charlottesville. This is very, very important because most of those groups were defunct. They were decentralized. They were irrelevant. But they actually funded one of the people, allegedly, who was the transportation coordinator to make sure that all these different groups showed up. And when they did, no single thing had hurt Donald Trump more than that riot when one person was run over. Because at that point, he said there were fine people on both sides. And he meant, if you listen to them, and he qualified that, which they always left out. He said, I'm not talking about the racists, etc. But they took that out of context, and they said there was a big white racist predetermined riot, and Donald Trump took the side of the Klan, and that really haunted him, even though people tried to explain that they cut off the second part of the qualifier, the sentence. And now we know that the Southern Poverty Law Center was worried that there were not enough victims around that they could justify their fundraising to their donors. They needed a lot of Charlottesville. They needed a lot of Michael Browns. They needed Trayvon Martin. Every one of those was not as it was, as everybody knew. Michael Brown did not say, hands up, don't shoot. We know that. Trayvon Martin was not a little innocent teenager in a football uniform. Somebody pointed out, you can take a picture, the left would take Charles Manson and show those 12-year-old pictures of him, if they wanted to. That's how they operate. But the point I'm making is that once they started funding those people, it was burning down the house, and then they showed up with a cure. Well, these people are organizing Unite the Right. They're really getting out of hand. We're following them. We're tracking them. We need money. We need money. We need money because it's going to be like 1960s, in the racist South. We need, and there was no threat that they hadn't ginned up. And it's, and so the other thing about them is they're insidious. They're everywhere. I was giving a lecture to the late Avi Davis. Remember him, Jack? He died prematurely, but he was the head of something called the American Freedom Alliance. And they asked me to speak on immigration, maybe 10 or 12 years ago. It was a very moderate. I said, if you have immigration that is illegal, not diverse, too large to be assimilated, and people who are coming impoverished, assimilation will be almost impossible, and integration. And the next thing I knew, the Southern Poverty Law Center had a big article that Victor Hanson went to this right-wing organization and was spouting neo-Nazi stuff. And there was a person in the audience who came up to me. She was very nice, and she said, let me get this straight. I heard you, and you think that immigration should be diverse with different. I said, yes, it makes it like the country itself, not all from south of the border, not because I'm picking on them, just the more different types of people we have, the more opportunities people have to come to America. And they need skills, so we don't endanger our poor citizens with an overtaxed social services system. And they should come only legally, and they should know English. Oh, okay. Next thing I knew, Southern Poverty Law Center had me on their website. And they do that to everybody. They did that to Aon. They do that to everybody.
Yeah.
So, you know what Voltaire said about the Holy Roman Empire? It wasn't holy, it wasn't Roman, it wasn't an empire. And the same thing is about the Southern Poverty Law Center. It's not Southern at all. It's really white liberals all over the country, but not so much in the South. And I encountered them in California. So it's not the Southern, and that has nothing to do with poverty. They have probably a near $1 billion endowment. They were getting $1 million, as Jack pointed out, donations. Their head was making, I don't know, 500 or 600,000 a year. They were paying out to this white racist, what was it, $220,000 to cause mayhem so they could come in as the fire brigade to put out the fire they lit and make a profit out of it. And They're not anything to do with the law. They're about breaking the law. Southern poverty law, no, you break the law. That's illegal for a private organization to pay people to cause havoc and then to defraud their donors by suggesting that that was a spontaneous event that they cooked up and to gin up their receipts.
Yeah, and
I
the
think the only thing I would say for them, it is a sinner of something, but it's it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
Southern, it's not poverty, and it's not
yeah.
law, but maybe it is a center of chaos.
They're very important, Victor, to the whole leftist project because not only is this, funding the Ku Klux Klan and these things, but I don't call it an anecdote, but they will then say, you, Victor, are a racist, or this nonprofit, this
Yes,
is a racist, and then foundations will not give
that's what they do.
donations
They use
because they
their
would,
That's a
yeah,
good point. They use their staff as a litmus test, and if you get on the wrong side of the litmus test, that goes into a computer, and you'll never get a grant from these multi-billion-dollar foundations, or your career, "Oh, he's been identified by the Southern Poverty Law Center." So what? That's a joke, and it's kind of like the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union.
right,
They used to be actually there were moments in their history when they were actually defending really unpopular people for free speech, and they got criticism. Remember that Nazi march in
and
And
Skokie, right?
Skokie? Yeah, I don't think they should have, but they did, and they said, "We have to because we have to support the principle of free speech when no one likes free speech, and the people who are expressing themselves freely are odious." Not now. Now they have boot camps to train people how to be activists on the left. So everything has changed with the left. I think it was because the country moved to the right, especially after Reagan, and they tried to resurrect the left, and they got frustrated, and so they outsourced their entire agenda to areas that were not contingent on politics. So the foundations, academia, Hollywood, popular culture, professional sports, they infiltrated all of that, the corporate boardroom, and they controlled that. And they said, we're going to change the culture and civilization of this country within the military, within the corporate boardroom, within the university. And we won't have to have actual power. It'll be good when we do. And eventually it'll result in actual political power because these institutions will change the balloting laws in states.
Right,
They'll call you a racist if you think you need an ID. They'll open the border. They'll help open the border. But we don't need them. We don't need them to get our hard left message that everybody doesn't like uh, through. We're going to do it without the people's consent. And that's
right,
how they got the transgender, men and girls restroom. Nobody wanted that. Nobody wanted biological males competing in women's sports. But they had the ability through all of these institutions to make it very hard on people who spoke out. Look at Riley Gaines.
right.
So if she spoke out, the operatives of the left in the university almost they tried to kill her almost. She was trapped in
What
California
was she
after
in San Francisco? Was she
yeah,
or
San
some? Yeah,
Francisco State, I think it was. She couldn't get
yeah.
out of the room, and she's stalked. He had to have security, and that's what they do.